Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Trudge, a journey to being recovered. I am a recovered drug addict, alcoholic. My name is Dexter. Welcome back to the program, everyone. I hope everyone's doing very well. I'm doing pretty well. Things are going great, and we continue to push forward through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in the hopes that you are having or will have a spiritual experience. We are now at chapter 8. We have finished all 12 steps, and we are going to begin doing what I like to call the alternative readings, which are going to close out, from pages 104 to 164, the last 60 pages. We're going to start talking about specific parts of the program that deal with life after being recovered. There's a chapter that we're going to go on today, chapter 8, called to wives, followed by one that speaks about your family, called the family afterward. And there's one to employers, and then there's a vision for you, which really just summarizes everything we've done to this point. We'll follow that up with Dr. Bob's Nightmare, and then we will be done with the program. So, chapter 8, to wives. Way back in the inception of this program, in the late 1930s, alcoholism was predominantly striking men. There were some first women alcoholics, the Marty Manns, the Ethel M's, the Florence R's, that came a little bit after the inception of this program came to fruition. But for the most part, it was the men. And in many cases, just like the case of Bill W. and Dr. Bob, the wives are the ones, that ended up, suffering at the hands of this disease. The families for sure always, succumb to the dereliction of alcoholism, but most times it was the wives who dealt, first and foremost with the fallout from the disease of alcoholism that, these men suffered from. This chapter is for them. Now in 2014, there's parts of this chapter that could, lend to it being entitled to spouses, because there's quite a few female alcoholics out there today whose husbands are suffering the same way that the wives suffered back then. But back then, this is what we were dealing with. I don't have a whole lot highlighted in this chapter in comparison to some of the other ones that we have done, but it is important nonetheless because it is chock full of pertinent information that will continue on through the program of recovery and you being recovered and staying that way. So before we get into chapter 8, let's go ahead and open our book study like we open all our book studies with our third step prayer. It's highlighted pink on page 63 for those of you who have been doing this work with me from day one. And for those of you who have not, welcome to Trudge. Let's take a moment, invite God in, and get to work. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Chapter 8, to wives, page 104. With few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men, just like I was just, speaking to. But what we have said applies quite as much to women. Our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. Back then, there was only a sprinkling of these few women in the beginning. Nowadays, I'd say it's close to half of our recovering or recovered population of people coming in or going back out, whatever the case may be, is women. I go sit in meetings a lot of times. There's a lot of women in there, Sometimes it's more women than men, depending on where you go. There's every evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestions. So I believe that should be highlighted. I don't know why I don't have it highlighted. So we're going to highlight that last sentence orange. There is every evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestions, if they try the program, if they work the program. This can work for anyone who puts the effort into it. I've worked with women as well as men, and I've seen the result be the same on both when they've done the work. This work's not gender specific, it works for whoever puts the effort into it. But for every man who drinks, others are involved. The wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch, the mother and father who see their son wasting away. That's what my parents watched me do until I got well. Among us are wives relatives and friends whose problem has been solved, and that's people who are recovered, people like me, people who came before me, the first 100. That problem is solved. The word solved is going to be circled, as well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. And we know many people out there in the rooms, not in the rooms, who have not yet come to finding the happy solution that we have found, which is the 12 steps, the power of God, and being recovered. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. What they will say will apply to nearly everyone bound by the ties of blood or affection to an alcoholic. As wives of Alcoholics Anonymous, we would like you to feel that we understand as perhaps few can. We want to analyze mistakes we have made. We want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness is too great to overcome. We have traveled a rocky road, and there is no mistake about that. We have had long rendezvous with hurt pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. These are not pleasant companions. We have been driven to maudlin sympathy, to bitter resentment. Some of us veered from extreme to extreme, ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. So, the Lois Wilsons of the world, Dr. Bob's wife, the wives of the first 100 men of this program, they collectively put this together. These women are talking to the wives that are out there. No one understands the debauchery of alcoholism like a wife of an alcoholic can, okay, or a wife of a drug addict can. And nowadays, it could be, vice versa, like the husband of a female alcoholic or female drug addict, okay? Our loyalty and desire that our husbands hold up their heads and be more like other men have begotten all sorts of predicaments. We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. We have told innumerable lies to protect our pride and our husband's reputation. So they're just talking about the lengths to which some of the wives have gone to maybe keep this a secret or dumb down the fact that this is a real problem, or to save jobs for their husbands, whatever the case may be. We have prayed, we have begged, we have been patient, we've struck out viciously. We have run away, we have been hysterical, we have been terror-stricken, we have sought sympathy, we have had retaliatory love affairs with other men. These are all the things that these women have been through over the time from when their husbands have succumbed to this disease to when they have gotten well, if they've even gotten well at all. Our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning, we have kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled chucking the men, and we have done so with finality, only to be back in a little while, hoping, always hoping. Our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever. We have believed them when no one else could or would. Then in days, weeks, months, a fresh outburst, okay? So it's just reiterating what the book has talked about to this point. We might be able to put that drink or that drug down for a certain period of time, only to go back to it. So now we're hearing about it from the flip side, from the wife's side, the girlfriend's side, the partner's side, okay? This is what they always succumb to, walking on eggshells, knowing that at some point there'd be a bomb that goes off, that fresh outburst, and that man would pick up a drink or a drug again. We seldom had friends in our homes, never knowing how or when these men of the house would appear. We could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone. When we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks that they spoiled the occasion. If, on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. I've been on both sides of that. There was never financial security. I have the word never circled. There just never was. All the money that was supposed to be going to where it was supposed to be going was a lot of times used to, purchase alcohol or drugs. Positions were always in jeopardy or gone. An armored car could not have brought the pay envelopes home. The checking account melted like snow in June. Wow. Sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they understood our man as we did not. This is, the case of lots of people. I went through some of this too. The bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, and even the ladies they sometimes brought home, our husbands thought were so inhospitable. Joy killer, nag, wet blanket, that's what they said. Next day, they would be themselves again, and we would forgive and try to forget. So, to this point, we're talking about what it was like for the wife, and it's almost like the alcoholic, thinking it will be different this time. If I just do it this way, or if I stop drinking this day, or go only drink here, or try this substance, thinking it will be different. For the wife, always thinking it would be different, this last time, whether he swears on the Bible, whether he, promises in a church in front of a group of people, whatever, whether he gets on his knees and begs her to stay, he'll never do it again. It never ever changed. Okay, we now know that without the solution, without that spiritual experience, that man's never going to get well. The day may never come where he changes. We have tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We have told small tots that father was sick, which was much nearer the truth than we realized, remembering that the alcoholic is a very sick person. We're dealing with an illness here, a malady. This man has bedevilments which are killing him, okay? It's no different than cancer, AIDS, whatever. This is a sickness, just like those are. They struck the children, kicked the door panels, smashed treasured crockery, and ripped the keys out of pianos. In the midst of such pandemonium, they may have rushed out, threatening to live with the other woman forever. Okay, this is some of the stuff that happens during a spree, possibly in the man's home. The wife may be nagging him. He may just be so drunk. The kids are just like not even a thought. And it's craziness happening in that home. At the ends, it's the pandemonium. Let's go ahead and circle that word pandemonium. I mean, it's absolute anarchy at that moment, okay? In desperation, we have even gotten tied ourselves. The drunk to end all drunks, I mean, at some point, some of the women just felt like, well, you know what? If this is what you're going to be doing and you can't stop, I might as well join you. And they would be getting drunk themselves, okay? Just not to feel how bad the pain was of having to watch their partner, their husbands, killing themselves daily, wanting to stop and not being able to stop. The unexpected result was that her husband seemed to like it. And a lot of times, who wants to drink alone? Two drunks is always better than one. And that never ever solved the drinking problem. In all actuality, it more than likely made it worse. Perhaps at this point we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. Usually we did not leave. You want to look at a perfect example of what it was like was the life of Lois Wilson. There's a movie out that Winona Ryder stars in, along with Barry Pepper. Barry Pepper plays Bill W. and Winona Ryder plays Lois Wilson. It's called When Love Is Not Enough. This is a perfect depiction of what Lois Wilson's life was with, Bill W. And she went through hell in this movie. And it probably doesn't even really come close to depicting what it was really like. There's the book called As Bill Sees It. This book, this movie was more like as Lois remembers it. And it probably doesn't really do it justice how bad things got for Lois and how she stayed. She never left. It was hard. It was just unbelievable to think that she put up with so much. And I'm grateful to her as well as Bill W. because I don't think we could have made the progress that we did if Bill didn't have Lois Wilson supporting him the way she did. It says we stayed on and on. We finally sought employment ourselves as destitution faced us and our families. Lois Wilson, she went to work, in the clothing department at a department store. Because Bill couldn't hold a sober breath after losing every job he ever held down. This is what she was forced into. And then many times, she would be getting ripped off from Bill because he wanted to buy alcohol. It was just a vicious cycle. It was very, very heartbreaking to think what this woman had to go through. And most of the women, of these husbands, around the first 100, couple hundred people, this was their story as well. So we began to ask medical advice as the sprees got closer together. The alarming physical and mental symptoms, the deepening pall of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved ones, these things terrified and distracted us. As animals on a treadmill, we have patiently and wearily climbed, falling back into exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. So it's kind of just like 1 foot forward, 10 steps back for the wives here, making just no progress. And believe me, these women, they tried everything they possibly could to help their husbands get well without being resentful, without trying to shame them. I mean, these women, they love their husbands. It was killing them to see this go on. But, at the end, the infidelity, the untreated alcoholism, it drove a lot of these women away. Not all of them stayed like Lois. So most of us have entered the final stage with its commitment to health, resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. We're starting to talk about the areas where the real alcoholic ends up, okay? Sometimes there was screaming delirium and insanity. Death was often near. So this is like the end that the wives are referring to of where their husbands were at. Many of them would be committed to asylums or locked up in hospitals, chained to beds. That's the natural progression from, just starting to have a couple drinks a day to the moderate drinker through the hard drinker. And, as those, we take those channels through and we continue to pass through those areas, things at the home get worse, the relationship gets worse, and finally we go from the hard drinker to the real alcoholic. And by that time, it's as bad as it possibly could be for everyone involved, especially the wife. Under these conditions, we naturally made mistakes. Some of them rose out of ignorance of alcoholism. Again, I think a big problem back then and even now is that people don't understand really what alcoholism is. The man in question, the drunk, he definitely didn't. Thinking his self-will could fix it, swearing, making a solemn oath would fix it, a geographical cure would fix it, and then the wife didn't know either, many times, and I believe if they would have known then what they knew now, they would have gone through it a lot differently and saved themselves a lot of heartbreak. But we had to get to that point somehow. You see, God bless these people. God bless these women who went through this. I don't take Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't take any 12-step program for granted. I don't look at it, with a grain of salt. What had to happen here for people like me to get to where I'm at today cannot be undervalued. It just can't be glossed over with a minimum of concern. It's unbelievable to think that if, Lois may not have stayed, what would have happened? People think that it's all about Bill and Bob and Bill D, and these are the founders of the program, no question about it. But behind the scenes, there was these wives, and what they did was integral and vital to the growth process of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. There's no question about it, and Al-Anon as well. So sometimes we sensed dimly that we were dealing with sick men. And again, if only they knew. It's not that they just love to drink. They're ill, okay? This is going to be highlighted orange. Had we fully understood the nature of the alcoholic illness, we might have behaved differently. That's highlighted orange. And like I said, I believe they would have, behaved differently. They just didn't know. How could men who love their wives and children be so unthinking, so callous, so cruel? There could be no love in such persons, we thought. And just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. Okay? So I have the word convinced circled because they're convinced that this is how it's going to be. These men can never change. They're heartless bastards, you know what I mean? How could they be so unloving to their wives and children? But the truth of the matter is that's not the case. They are sick. Okay? They were sick. Again, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attentions. The real Dr. Jekylls and Mr. Hydes. Noble churchgoers, deacons, hardworking stockbrokers, laymen, good dads, good earners. But all those great respects go out the window when it comes time for alcohol. None of that stuff matters. How good of a man they are goes out the window, okay? It's not because they didn't want to be good men. They were spiritually sick. They have an illness, okay? For a while, they would be their old sweet selves, only to dash the new structure of affection to pieces once more. Continuing on with the spree, the man without a spiritual experience will drink again. Okay? Asked why they commenced to drink again, some would reply with some silly excuse or none. Well, I got fired, or you know what I mean. I'm irritated, or all the boys were going out and I didn't want to not go. I didn't want to, be less of a man. I mean, we've heard all these excuses. Hell, I've used a ton of them myself. Maybe you have as well. Okay? It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could it have been so mistaken in the men? Could we have been so mistaken in the men we married? And they weren't mistaken. The men they married were awesome, you know? But then the alcoholism untreated kicks in, and we turn into different people, okay? When drinking, they were strangers. There it is. You might as well be married to a stranger at that point. Sometimes they were so inaccessible that it seemed as though a great wall had been built around them. Man, alcoholism closes you off from anything that's real. You just cannot be reached. People cannot get through to you. There's one thing you're thinking about, and that's alcohol. And that's the buying and getting ways and means to have more. Okay? The obsession of the mind, coupled with the phenomenon of craving that we spoke about early in the program from the doctor's opinion. The great Dr. William D. Silkworth, he nailed it. That's what alcoholism is like. You are you're suffering from the bondage of self. You built a fortress around yourself that you cannot be reached. And there's usually, if you're an alcoholic of the real variety, there is one solution, and this is the spiritual nature. And even if they did not love their families, how could they be so blind about themselves? What had become of their judgment, their common sense, their willpower? Why could they not see that a drink meant ruin to them? Why was it, when these dangers were pointed out, that they agreed and then got drunk again immediately? It's like, I know, like, if I drink, man, there's a good chance that I'm going to hurt myself, and I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to be in any physical, mental pain, right? And I'm going to agree with you that that's what's going to happen if I go that route, and then 10 minutes later, I go that route. It's like, I know if I'm touching a hot stove, I'm going to get burned. I know it's going to burn me, so I'm going to decide not to do it, but then do it. That's alcoholism. That's the insanity behind this disease. We cannot choose to stop if we are alcoholic or drug addict of the real variety. If we can stop or moderate and stay stopped, we're not a real alcoholic or drug addict. We're not one of the people in these books. We're not the man and woman on page 21. We probably don't suffer from the bedevilments on page 52, okay? We can be hard drinkers, moderate drinkers, but the real alcoholic left to his own devices will drink again, period, okay? That's what the book says. That's the combined experience of thousands of alcoholics who never got recovered. That's a combined experience of the first 100. It's very clear in this book. And the wives are telling you that this is what they've witnessed over time, okay? These are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who has an alcoholic husband. We hope this book has answered some of them. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism where everything is distorted and exaggerated. If you're watching this right now, you know exactly what that is. You know exactly what the book's talking about there, okay? I couldn't differentiate fantasy from reality sometimes. It was that bad. You can see that he really does love you with his better self, his not drunk self, his not high self, right? Of course, there is much in such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. It is usually because he is warped and sickened that he says and does these appalling things, okay? And why does he do these things? He does these things because he's suffering from a disease, not because he's not a good man. He's sick. Today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. And I just wrote the word boom after that. Just boom. Because I tell you what, folks, I really take pride in being a great dad today. I do. My lowest moments happen around my kid, and boy, I'm so grateful. Like, my son is like my best friend today. I love my son more than anything. I could have never gotten to this point without having done this work. I love my fiance. I don't need another woman. I just need her. I mean, how I could never have been able to do these things or say these things prior to doing this work. A spiritual experience was absolutely necessary for me to get well. Remember, we practice these principles in all our affairs, not just with putting down the drink, okay? And I really take pride in that. You know, like I get to own my past. I get to own how good it feels now to be not just a man that pays child support, but like a dad, someone my kid can trust, you know, someone my wife, can trust, not worry about, confide in, feel safe around. I could never have done that during my active drug addiction and alcoholism. I just wasn't capable. I was only thinking about myself. Try not to condemn your alcoholic husband no matter what he says or does. That's very difficult, okay? There's a lot of difficult actions coming from this book, but we have to try to do them, wives. You know, husbands who are suffering with alcoholic wives, we have to try to do them, okay? He or she is just another very sick, unreasonable person, okay? The person's sick. Okay, let's go ahead and circle the word sick. And let's go ahead and make an action out of this first sentence of that paragraph where it says, try not to condemn your alcoholic husband no matter what he says or does. Actions are going to be green. Just try not to do that. Nothing ever good's going to come of that. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. Again, these are very hard to deal with. When you've got a guy who's out there probably being unfaithful, drinking and drugging, stealing every dollar you have to get more, could care less about his children, the last thing you want to do is try to give this guy a pass. I get it, but the book is very clear that we have to treat these men as if they're spiritually sick. Get them to the place where you can understand and they can understand exactly what is wrong with them. From there, we have a starting off point at which we can get well, if that person is interested in getting well. There's an important exception to the foregoing. We realize some men are thoroughly bad intentioned, that no amount of patience will make any difference, okay? There's men out there like that are just scumbags. Sometimes you just married a scumbag. That's just how it is, okay? But that's not always the case. I believe there's help for everyone. I really, really do, if they choose to have that help, okay? An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let him get away with it. If you're positive he is one of this type, the real alcoholic, and you feel you had better leave, then leave. Leave. You're going to be better off, okay? You have to stay safe. Your children have to be safe. Is it right to let him ruin the life and the lives of your children? Especially when he has before him a way to stop this drinking and abuse. If he really wants to pay the price, and there's that price, we're talking about simple but easy. A price had to be paid. I believe that says it on page 13. We're talking about this again. Paying the price, what it takes to be recovered, helping others, trusting God, cleaning house, altruism, okay? He's got a situation where he can get well. He's got a solution, Some people still don't want it at that point. Bottom line is they're just not ready. They'd rather drink than do the work. Some are definitely sicker than others. The problem with which you struggle usually falls in one of four categories. So, through the next page or two, we're going to talk about the four categories, the four stages of the alcoholic as the wife sees it. We've already kind of done this in the chapter called More About Alcoholism, the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, the real alcoholic. This is going to be the version from the wife's point of view. Number one, your husband may only be a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he doesn't see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle his liquor, but that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number of us will become true alcoholics after a while. Okay, so this is, your husband's got sprinklings, he's got touches. Sometimes he can stop or moderate. Sometimes he's an embarrassment. He makes the excuses, his business needs it. Okay, alcoholic number one. Alcoholic number two, as the wife sees it. Your husband is showing lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. He admits that this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning, through the day also, to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. We think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. I have the words real alcoholic underlined. Remember, this isn't about conscious separation of people in these rooms or in the fellowship or the program. Bill W. wants you to make the distinction. The wives, they want you to make the distinction here. Okay? If you can moderate or stop, you're not a real alcoholic. You don't need the spiritual solution. But these are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. Okay? This is who I was. Okay, husband number 2. And you can drink from yourself from husband number 1 to husband number 2, 3, 4, till the grave. Okay, you absolutely can do that. Perhaps he can still tend business fairly well. He has by no means ruined everything. As we say to ourselves, he wants to stop. That's exactly who I was. In all my other respects, I was great provider, worked hard. Shit, I even went to school. You know what I mean? But when it came time for my alcohol or my drugs, everything went out the window, and it was none of that stuff mattered. You know, and I drank to live and lived to drink. I used to live and live to use. That's who I was. Okay. Husband number 3. This husband has gone further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he became worse. His friends have slipped away, his home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. Okay, so we've really made that jump here. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but he does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have to come to the point where he desperately wants to stop, but cannot. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. Alcoholic number 4, as the wives see it. You may have a husband of whom you completely despair. You may even loathe him. Okay, his very existence may just make you sick. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. This is who Bill W. was. This is who Bill D. was, okay? Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. You know, Bill Dotson was notorious for doing that. Drank, 6 or 7 times after the last 8 times he was in the hospital on the way home. Okay, perhaps he has had delirium tremens. Bill W. went through that, and tons of us have done that. I even went through some of that, okay? Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you've already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. It's telling you that you can get well. You can be alcoholic 1, 2, 3, or 4, and the opportunity for you to get well is there. Many of our first 100 was like alcoholic number 4. Many of our first 100, escaped the gates of death. Had days to live and found their way out. Okay, this is not unusual. Let's now go back to husband number 1. Oddly enough, he is difficult to deal with. He enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when things don't go too far. You have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before your fire. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We have had a good time. We know all about liquor as a social lubricant. Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantages when reasonably used. And I don't doubt that. I don't disagree with that. Before I drank myself into full-blown alcoholism and drug addiction, there were times that, having them used as a social lubricant was quite fun. It may enhance your sex life. It may enhance your social life. I'm not going to disagree with that. At least that was the case for me. But I'm a real alcoholic. I'm a real drug addict. And the day came where we went way past that. And the last thing I wanted to do at that point was be social. I could care less about, anything that happened in my bedroom with my woman. It didn't matter. What mattered was the drink. And if you put yourself in that area, if you place yourself beyond human aid in that capacity, the spiritual experience, you're going to have to concede at some point to get well will be absolutely necessary. So we've gone through quite a bit of the chapter. We've talked about the 4 kinds of alcoholics. We've reiterated them again. It's a long chapter, and again, I'm running out of gas. It takes a lot to do this. I'm a little tired, so we're going to stop there for today. We're coming up on 35 minutes. I think that's enough. Next week, we will do 2 Wives Part 2. We will continue to hear the wives' point of view and speaking of the recovery that it takes for these men to get well. And as always, it always pays to go over everything. Everything you have done in this book with this program with me from day one, from the preface to page 110 where we're at now. It all matters. It is all necessary to continue to stay spiritually fit. None of this information is more important than the other. Some of the POIs are absolute importance to know and understand and use them in your life. However, I cannot reiterate enough and stress and smash home enough and emphasize and re-emphasize, just like the book has done with me, how important it is to go over this work and to continue to use the spiritual principles that have been embodied in these steps in your day-to-day practices. So that's all for Trudge, a journey to being recovered this week. My name is Dexter Argan. Thank you for allowing me to be of service. Sorry about the glare on my glasses. I'm like looking at my iPad right now. I can tell there's some glare coming off. I need to give my eyes a break, so spectacles it is. Hopefully that doesn't take away from the program too much. Again, hope you're doing well out there. Hope you're feeling good. Hope what the promises are coming true for you. And if they're not, go back and read the green parts and ask yourself, what is it that I'm not doing? Am I not working with others? Am I forgetting to pray and meditate? Ask yourself, go through the steps. Go through the actions of the steps. If you're doing the actions of the steps, the promises are coming true. If you're doing this, this is happening. There's just no way around it. We have rarely seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed this path. And so that's kind of where we're at. Until next week, everybody, remember to go over work, pay attention, pay it forward, and definitely rely on God and not on others until such time when we meet again, guys. Namaste.